Good afternoon. Welcome to our third episode of Roberta's Countdown to Retirement. It's really exciting. Today's September 1st. It's Labor Day, so make sure you say thank you to labor leaders out there who fight to make sure we have 40-hour work weeks, that we have vacation time and sick time and all those things that people have been fighting for years. It's important to hang on to those things. So I'm really also excited because guess what? Yesterday, I got to count off one more month in my retirement schedule. So now I have 28 months to go. Yay! Yay me! I'm excited about that. So today I wanted to talk about work-life balance and making sure you take time for self-care. It's not something I'm always really good at, which I noticed when it got to be July of this year, and I realized it had been a year and a half since I'd taken a vacation. So I had to look around and see what kind of stuff I'd like to do. We'd like to be able to keep track of those things, but it doesn't always happen. So I took a look at a calendar and I was trying to find things to do with my time. And you wonder, what do I want to do? So I have to fall out on guilty pleasures, things that I give into that make excuses to take trips. So the guilty pleasures I want to talk about today are soap operas. I've been a soap opera fan since I was a small child. My mom was watching Another World and Days of Our Lives and The Doctors. So those are the things I grew up on. And then I discovered another one I liked when I was younger was Love is a Many Splendored Thing. It was the same title as a movie, but a little different from the movie. And then as I hit my teenage years, I fell in love with the soaps on ABC. General Hospital, One Life to Live, All My Children. Got to be a huge fan in the late 70s, early 80s of General Hospital and the Luke and Laura phenomenon. But as I was getting out of high school, a new phenomenon came along. It was called the nighttime soap. That's what people called it. Television called it a nighttime drama. But in essence, it was a nighttime soap. And the first one that came along in the spring of 1978 was Dallas. It was a limited run series that was supposed to be a vehicle for the actress Victoria Principal. But the phenomenon was that Larry Hagman's J.R. Ewing character took over the show, and it became that. The limited series did so well that in September, they started a full-run series of Dallas. It was the story of the Ewings and the Barneses. It was a Romeo and Juliet story. Pamela Barnes was the Juliet, and Bobby Ewing was Romeo. Young and handsome, young and beautiful, taking place in Dallas. The Ewing family is oil-rich. The Barneses not so much, because Pamela's father always blamed Bobby's father for the fact that they'd been wildcatting together, and while Digger had a drinking problem, it seemed like Jock took over and created Ewing Oil and took everything that Digger had worked for. So it was interesting and fun. And yes, it was a soap opera. I don't care what CBS called it, it was a soap opera. And then, and then Dallas got a show to play off of it called Knots Landing. The Ewings had a son, Gary, who had a drinking problem, and he'd run away from his responsibilities with the Ewing family. And in 1991, he came back. Actually, it was December of 1979. Gary Ewing came back to Dallas, and so did his ex-wife, Valine. JR had stolen their baby Lucy, and Lucy had grown up to the age of 16 with the Ewings. But then Valine came back, and Gary came back, and they got married, and they decided to start over in California on a cul-de-sac that was in a place called Knots Landing. So I liked Knots Landing a little better than Dallas because Dallas was total soap opera plots. Knots Landing a lot of times dealt with real social issues like drug abuse, alcohol abuse, spousal abuse, and so it was a little more middle class. What was it? I heard somewhere that the producer of Knots Landing said, "This is a story about us. Dallas is a story about them." So that was my soap opera stuff that I loved. A little later, CBS developed another one, Falcon Crest. It came on in 1981. And so Thursday night was my Knots Landing night. Friday night was Dallas. And after Dallas came Falcon Crest, which starred Jane Wyman as this really strong, independent older woman running a winery. And she wouldn't call herself a villain, but the rest of the world called her a villain of the piece. So those were my guilty pleasures on CBS. ABC then developed Dynasty, which then had a spin-off, The Colbys. So Dynasty was my Wednesday night, and Colbys was my thing that I taped on Friday nights because it came on while Dallas and Knots Landing were on. But I always videotaped The Colbys. I think what was interesting was that all of these shows had a draw for actors, classic actors. Dallas had Howard Keel. If you remember him from the musicals of the 40s and 50s, one of my favorites was Seven Brides for Seven Brothers with Jane Powell, Howard Keel. Barbara Bel Geddes was an acclaimed theater actor from the New York stage before she became Miss Ellie on Dallas. Knots Landing, Ava Gardner. Oh my gosh, everyone knows Ava Gardner and the films she made in the 40s and 50s. Ava Gardner on there. And then, like I said, on Falcon Crest, Jane Wyman, if you've never seen a classic film that you ought to see, it's Jane Wyman in a film called Johnny Belinda, where she's a deaf-mute girl who is raped and gets pregnant, and this local doctor is new to the community, and he helps her, and they fall in love. It's great, great, great story. I love it. But, so those are my guilty pleasures. But you're going like, what does that have to do with your vacation or your time off? Well, I'll tell you. I work in a very public venue. I work as a retail lead for the Tillamook Creamery in their flagship store in their visitors center in Tillamook, Oregon. So in the summer, we see somewhere between 8 and 10,000 people a day. Before COVID, it was somewhere between 10 and 12, and I'm sure we'll get back there again. But that means that I have to make some time as an introvert, I need time to what I call de-people. So I spend time alone streaming television shows, and I started rewatching Dallas, and I started rewatching Knots Landing, and that's where I'm getting to now. Is I started rewatching Dallas, and then I started rewatching Knots Landing, and after I'd watched Knots Landing one day for several episodes, I was on the internet and I started finding something new. I found a podcast. We're not, KNOT, done yet. It's a podcast that Donna Mills, Joan Van Ark, and Michelle Lee from Knots Landing do. They do a weekly podcast. They talk about their acting careers. They talk about Knots Landing and work with the people they worked with, and the working process. And it's just really fun to listen to them. But they started talking about that they had been invited to a reunion in Dallas. And they talked about this convention called the South Fork Experience. So I looked it up. And it's an annual event that happens in actually Richardson, Texas, at the Marriott Renaissance. And apparently every year they get actors from Dallas. And this year they invited the three ladies from Knots Landing. And there were some other things. There was Knots Landing. And because Jenna Lee Harrison was a Dallas star, as well as other things, and they did a Three's Company reunion, so Joyce DeWitt and Priscilla Barnes were going to be there. So that looked really exciting. So I booked a trip and asked my boss if I could get the time off. I was going to be gone a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and you're saying, well, that's not a long time, but I took a week and a half off so that I could do this and something else. So the boss said yes, and in August, I hopped a bus to Portland, and then I took a Uber to the Radisson Hotel so that I could get there the night before, because I had booked a flight at like 5:30 in the morning. I am one of those independent people who doesn't like to bother other people to take them the 80 miles to Portland and to the airport. So I generally do this. I'm really lucky. The Tillamook Wave is our bus company, and since I was only going to be gone for a long weekend, I could do park and ride. I drove my car to Tillamook, caught the bus right at the station in Tillamook, and they take me to Union Station in downtown Portland. Uber took me out to the Radisson near the airport, and the next morning I was at the airport at gate 10 ready to go to Denver, because I had to go to Denver before I could go to Dallas. And then I got to Dallas. Took me 7 hours, but I got to Dallas. And I was ready to go to the South Fork Experience. And there I am. That's my proof. I was at the South Fork Experience with JR there to welcome me. Really, really, really cool. And then I knew I was there because these pictures are iconic. The picture of the guy in the cowboy hat is Jock Ewing. It hung over the mantle in the den at South Fork, which was their ranch. There was another one in JR's office. He was the patriarch, and that picture was really iconic. Over to the right, you'll see the other iconic characters. J.R. Ewing always wanted to be the only son, but he was one of three, and he was always fighting for his place and always fighting for his father's approval. He disappointed his father a lot, but a lot of times he was what Jock Ewing wanted him to be. Down below is Cliff Barnes, son of Digger, always fighting to gain back what he thought the Ewings had stolen from the Barneses. And it went on for every year of the show. This is the room where everyone was going to sit and listen to panels, and that backdrop is iconic because those were the things that played as in the opening credits of Dallas. So it was like I was coming home to a guilty pleasure. Now, I got there Friday afternoon, so I'd already missed some panels. So I didn't really get to see any panels until Saturday. And the one I got to see first was a great fun one where they had the romantic pairs of Dallas. So there was Sherry Wilson and Patrick Duffy, she played April Stevens, Bobby's second or third wife. Linda Gray and Christopher Atkins That was a real eye opener when Christopher Atkins showed up. If everybody remembers him as a very young actor in Blue Lagoon with Brooke Shields. Well, he showed up on Dallas as this much younger man for Sue Ellen Ewing, and it was a real scandal because although older men can have younger women, even today it's still kind of a scandal. But we weren't talking about cougars back then, and now we are. So anyway, that was one of the pairings. And although Susan Howard couldn't make it, she had someone there to take her place sitting next to Steve Canale, who played Ray Krebs, who in later episodes of Dallas we discovered was Jock Ewing's illegitimate son, so he was a Ewing. And then on the end was Lee McCluskey and Charlene Tilt. They were married, and just before Charlene Tilton left, not Dallas. So they were playing, rather than doing question and answers like normal panels do, they did their version of the Newlywed Game, where they wanted questions answered. They'd all really screwy questions, and to see if they could match. Patrick Duffy and Sherry Wilson, not so much, but they were having a great time being wrong and laughing. You can see they really care about each other and laugh, and Patrick just didn't care anymore. He was just having a good time. Sue Ellen, Linda Gray, and Chris Atkins, they did pretty well at knowing how their characters answer these really silly questions. And Steve Canale, I don't think he got maybe two things right as opposed to Susan Howard had sent her answers in before they got there. But he was having a great time. One of the most approachable people at the convention. Lee McCluskey and Charlene Tilton got everything right. They know each other well. They know their characters well, and they had a great time. All these folks are really approachable and willing to talk to fans as they were coming off the stage, and you can get close to them. That's the thing I love about a small convention like this. You can get close to people and talk to them and let them know how much you love what they did for you on TV. Next panel I got to go to was the one with the ladies from Knots Landing, Michelle Lee, Joan Van Ark, and Donna Mills. They talked about the hair and makeup dramas of Knots Landing. They talked about working with someone really fantastic, a legend. Julie Harris played Valene Ewing's mom. She's a legend on the theater in New York and also in classic films. I saw her with James Dean in John Steinbeck's East of Eden. It was like one of my favorite things to watch is that film, watching her as a young woman. And then seeing her on Knots Landing as an older woman. She had basically abandoned her daughter over and over again as she tried to get her own country music career. So she and Valene, their relationship was fraught with all kinds of abandonment issues, and it was good. So it was great. And again, these are really approachable people. Michelle Lee especially really approachable. The people I was sitting with were telling me the night before that she actually sat down at their dinner table in the restaurant downstairs, and it was really funny, and they helped her upstairs in the elevator afterwards. Really, really approachable people. And then one of the other panels I got was really fun to go to the Three's Company and listen to them talk about what that experience was like working on that comedy with John Ritter, with Norman Fell, Audra Roper, Don Knotts, getting to work with comedy classics, and what they did with their lives afterwards. That's really, really fun to listen to. Again, really approachable people, really self-deprecating people, willing to laugh at their foibles. It was a great panel. So basically, all the stars from Dallas were there. There were the people who played small parts, and actually there are no small parts. There are just parts that make the show interesting. Andrew Stevens, He played they had a panel called Pawns, JR's Pawns or Ewing's Pawns, people that JR played to get what he wanted to do. And Andrew Stevens was one of my favorite actors back in the early 80s. I saw him like in the late 70s. I can't remember when it aired, but based on John Jake's novels, The Bastard, the American, and another one that was about the American Revolution and a Frenchman who had to leave France. And he was also in a CBS, another nighttime drama soap opera called Emerald Point NAS, where he played a naval airman. He was a hunk. They always, as he said, in the 80s, he didn't wear his shirt very much because that was the thing. The ladies wanted to see that chest. But that Morgan Fairchild was there. She was the first Jenna, who was the person who broke Bobby and Pam up. And I recognized her from a show I loved, another soap opera called Flamingo Road, which she starred in with Mark Harmon. I loved her in that. So these were just some of the. Kathy Podwell played JR's much younger second wife, who he was cruel to and kicked her off. And the last thing she said was she was pregnant and she was going to run away, and JR was never going to know where his baby was. So I don't know what happened. There was a reboot of Dallas in 2012. So the actors from there, Jesse Metcalfe and Josh Henderson, were there. They played. Jesse played Christopher Ewing, an adult Christopher Ewing, and Josh played John Ross Ewing. And they took up the mantle of the battle between good and evil for Bobby and JR. And it left on a cliffhanger. I've always hoped they'd resolve that. We don't know what happened, but it was great to see them there. They had a great time. You're going to remember Jesse Metcalfe from Desperate Housewives. He played the yardman that worked for Gabriella, was her boy toy. Just fun things. We got to learn about their careers, everybody's careers since then, and the things they love doing and what they hope to be doing in the future. It's really fun. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, especially about knots, was the tie that these nighttime soap operas have with daytime soap operas. Lorimar Productions, specifically with Knots Landing, seem to have a real tie with General Hospital. Because Valine, when she broke up with Gary in the midst of Knots Landing's episodes, subsequently she married two more times, and the actors that played her husbands were Doug Sheehan and Sam Behrens. Now, they'd both come from General Hospital, where, oddly enough, since they were both married at different times to Valine on Knots Landing, oddly enough, they had been with the same character in General Hospital. I always thought that was fun and interesting. And Donna Mills had previously worked with someone named Leslie Charlson, who became Dr. Monica Quartermain, a foundation of General Hospital that we just lost this past year. She'd worked with Leslie on Love is a Many Splendid Thing, and then a couple of years ago, Donna herself worked on General Hospital as nasty Mother Madeline to batshit crazy Nina. So Knots Landing seems to have a real tie with General Hospital that I've always found is really, really interesting. So that was my really quick weekend. And one of the things I always do at the end of the convention is when it's over, I try to do a nice dinner with a nice wine. So right across from where the hotel where we were staying was, there was a little Italian restaurant whose name I cannot remember, but I had this wonderful chicken parmigiana and an Italian Pinot Noir. And it's always nice when you're doing the rush of a convention, you're kind of catching your meals, catch as can, and you're not getting really good food. But I always like to give myself something really nice, and this was a wonderful, wonderful meal that I really enjoyed because I was ready to kick back and just reflect on all the fun I'd had meeting people who loved these shows as much as I did, sharing time, sharing our favorite episodes. You talk a lot with people because you're in line a lot. This is a very small convention, so it wasn't too bad. And I was at I paid for a ticket that I got a nice seat at a table for the panels, and the ladies I sat with were from, I think, Kentucky. And I love talking with them. They're younger than I am, so they're watching Dallas for like the first time together. And so they were at this convention. I had a great time talking with them. The last thing I did at the convention was my photo op with the ladies of Knots Landing. And this is like my best thing. I wish I'd had more time to talk with them because I would like to tell them what they meant to me. And so I'm going to do that here. When I was working in like 1988, 89, I had this job. It was probably the best job, one of my favorite jobs that I've ever had. But all the women who worked there were working for some rather misogynistic men who believed, especially the one vice president of flight operations, believed that any woman was fair game. So anytime we got called into his office to take dictation or help with a project, we were always trying to make sure the door was remained open. And I found myself channeling Donna Mills's Abby, because Abby wouldn't have taken that kind of crap off of any man. He never would have gotten away with the things that this man did. In fact, at the Christmas party when we were dressing semi-formally, so I was in a cocktail dress. Not what I would wear to work, and showed more figure than I usually showed at work. And this man actually made a grab for my breast. I was lucky. My coworker's husband was there, and we thought he was going to clock my boss, but he didn't. We left. But nonetheless, on a daily basis at work, I was channeling Abby, and I want to thank Donna Mills for giving us that kind of character, because up until that show and the shows that were going on in the 80s, we didn't see women who worked and who had to hold their own with men. We saw women who stayed home and took care of the kids and cooked and cleaned and did the PTA thing. But that's not what we were seeing now. So I want to thank Donna Mills for Abby. And I want to thank Michelle Lee for Karen, because Karen showed me that how to be persistent, how to work the problem. She was always trying to help solve the problems of the neighborhood and the cul-de-sac. And she worked it and she worked it and she worked it until the problem got solved. So I learned to be persistent from Michelle Lee. Joan Van Ark, Valine. Here's what I learned from Valine and from Joan. She got knocked down a lot, but she always got back up and dusted herself off and found a way to walk forward, to work forward and go on with life. Even when her babies had been stolen, even when Abby stole Gary, Valine always got up. So I learned resilience from Joan Van Ark and Valine Ewing. And I want to say thank you for showing us characters that didn't always have a man to take care of it and solve the problem for them. That's what I learned from Knots Landing, is we can do it on our own. It's nice to have a man around, but we can do it on our own. And I want to thank all three ladies for giving me that view of a world that I didn't get to see very much here where I live. So that's what I did with 4 days of my vacation. And then I came home and I spent a whole week doing absolutely nothing. I drank coffee at Starbucks. I read books, romance books, totally thoughtless things, did nothing, didn't even think of work. did my laundry after vacation, and that's about all I did. The rest of the time I just watched movies, read books, really took the time to just rest, because that's what you need to do when you're working. You need to make sure that you take care of yourself. No one else will take care of you. You've got to learn to take care of yourself, advocate for yourself, take your vacation time, you earn it. I'm going to be honest. I told you it had been a year and a half since I'd had a vacation. I've worked for my job 10 years, and I don't take long vacations. So when I left on vacation, I had 211 hours of accumulated personal time off that I could take. I also had, this job is really great, I also had 8 hours of personal holiday I could take. I had reward time for something I had done years ago that I had 11 hours of reward time. So between all of those hours in PTO, I used enough that I have, according to last paycheck, 171 hours left that I can take off. So obviously, I need to do more self-care and more time off to make sure I'm well rested. And it doesn't matter if you're 65, 45, or 25, you need to do those things, because we're not meant to work 7 days a week. We're not meant to work and work and work till we drop. We're meant to take time for ourselves, because how can we do our jobs especially when you work in the public like I do, how can you do your job well if you're not rested and ready and willing and open to being available to the public? So that's the lesson for today. Take your time to do the things you need to do for yourself. Take time to spend with friends. Yesterday, my self-care was going to a performance of the play Clue at our local Tillamook Association for the Performing Arts Community Theater. Even if it's just a weekend thing, make sure you take time to do you, and make sure you take care of you and your family. So that's all I've got to say today. I hope you'll join me next week. We'll see you then.